Right, good afternoon everybody, and thank you for staying with us after lunch and not wandering off into the Mayfield depot. It's exciting, but can be distracting. So to finish today's events, we've got a series of 5 smart talks from 5 brilliant speakers, and across a whole range of subjects. We've got Matt Rooney from Anthesis, we've got Kate Gilmartin from the Local Energy Northwest Hub, we've got Amma from Manchester Met, who's going to talk about the Fuel Cell Innovation Centre. We've got Gareth Hughes, and we've also got Chris. You're not on my main list, Chris, that's shocking. Who's the director of HyNet that you've heard mentioned a few times, so we might be able to get into the detail of HyNet as well. So those are our speakers that we'll be running through this afternoon. Each has got 10 minutes, and then we're moving swiftly on to the next one, just to get us even deeper into some of these really important topics. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Matt to kick us off. Matt, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon everyone. Thanks for having us. Hope you're enjoying the warmth coming back into your limbs as much as I am. It's great to be here. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about Scatter. So a modelling tool that was developed here in Manchester, funded by Bayes a number of years ago. And I'm going to do it in 4 relatively, hopefully quick and punchy parts. So the first is what is Scatter? So I'll spare you the long acronym. I don't want to spend time reciting that now, but it's essentially a modelling tool, and it's broken down into 2 parts. The first does some of the profiling at a city level and at a borough level, and the second does some of the more forward-looking scenario analysis bits. So just to go into a little bit of depth on the inventory, you might be familiar with some of the data that's publicly available. What our tool does is it actually uses that and it aligns it with some of the world's sort of best practice accounting standards to make it as efficient and easy as possible for local authorities to understand their impact and report it. So you'll see there the likes of CDP and the Covenant of Mayors. Our tool just at one click, you select your drop down and it spits out an inventory that's aligned with some of the world's leading cities and leading municipalities on reporting. Second part, so the pathways, by far probably the most much more interesting part, is then exploring, well, how could emissions reduce and what does it look like when we start making some of these changes that you've heard about, I'm sure not just this morning, but just in general, across the different sectors. Well, to build this model, we based it actually on the late great Sir David Mackay's work with the DEC 2050 calculator. And we made a couple of changes to it. So that calculator was national, and we were trying to build something for local authorities. So we needed to scale it down. So we've scaled down a lot of the national data in different ways to give a local authority picture. And the second thing we did, because that tool was quite old, we had to up the ambition and we had to change a load of the technologies that have come on leaps and bounds. And you heard in one of the speeches today just how much in a 10-year period things have moved on. So we did that as well when we were building it. But I'd say in terms of what value does this part add, one of the really critical things, and we've seen this in terms of how it's been used, is that it gives a sense of vision for what does a small area actually look and feel like if you make some of these changes. So looking across some of the sectors, sorry that the screen's probably tiny from the back, but picking any one of these sectors, so take buildings, it will give a sort of tailored number of houses, how many houses in a certain region need deep retrofit, how much of a shift is needed in transport from cars to bikes, and by what date do we need to electrify things by. And of course in energy, it gives metrics like not just in megawatt hours, but it helps you visualize how many football pitches of solar will we need to cover our city with. And as a footballing city in Manchester, let me tell you that the stats that Scatter gives are far more scary than some of the football results you might see on that one in particular. So it really helps bring to life what is needed to decarbonise. In terms of what it looks like, again, apologies those at the back, we've managed to get it onto a web-based platform, so it's full of sliders and drop-down things and super visual, easy, intuitive ways of exploring for a local authority area what's needed. And so we've got a load of levers and a load of sort of indicative ambition levels. If you slide some of those levers in one direction, sort of up in the ambition, then you'll see that trajectory start to dip and start to nosedive towards that 0 x-axis. So why is this useful? So beyond the obvious, well, it saves authorities having to pay a load of money to rebuild all this over and over again. There's a number of trends that we've seen where we've been putting this into practice. I think the first really is on this education bit. We heard a bit earlier around the importance of leadership. Well, this tool has helped inform leaders as to what's required. So looking across, elected members in councils, looking at senior council officers, looking at businesses in regions and citizens. We're very privileged to be rolling this out at the Manchester Community Assembly the other week. So it's really, really critical to help understand what's needed and go a bit beyond just the themes that we all know about, to actually put some stats and facts and figures to this has been a crucial bit of value that it's added. The second thing is scatter. It really represents, so I've got tech enablement as a theme, but it really represents the power of technology in making life easy for people. And if you make life easy for people, they're more likely to adopt and make changes. So that's a big factor in all this, and it helps local authorities who are pretty resource constrained take some massive shortcuts in understanding this. And I think the final one then is on the action planning. So again, how this has been used, certainly in the Northwest, as I'll tell you in a minute, there's tons of examples where local authorities have gone on to wrap around different actions. So whether that's a policy change, whether that's a bit of a feasibility study or projects or other types of engagement, all of that stuff has been pinned in a lot of the evidence and the data. So who has it helped? Well, at a headline level, we've had an incredible uptake across the UK. So about over three quarters of all local authorities now are using our tool, which is quite an incredible proportion that we know we've helped and had an impact with. And looking a bit more at the action planning side, so over half of the respondents to CDP's Cities programme, where they have, cities and companies do respond on what action they're taking, over half have used our tool in doing that. So again, those shortcuts have really been felt, and it's hopefully helped a lot of the respondents there. But of course, today is all about the Northwest, and I've pulled up some examples there sort of locally of how this tool has helped. And just to talk to a few examples there, I mentioned GMCA, so within the 5-year environment plan, you'll see a load of stats littered throughout that plan that have come from Scatter, that again, they give that plan a bit more substance and a bit more clarity as to the order of magnitude sort of shifts that we need to make. Other than that, there's a few really good examples there where we've educated councils, members, and seen some pretty shocked looking faces when people understand that realism of what's needed. But also on the action planning side as well, looking at certainly Cheshire East, Cheshire West, Wigan, Stockport, their action plans that you can find online will see Scatter featuring and providing some of that information. I think the final one is just on the City of Manchester. So we're just concluding, again, another action plan that includes it all. But the reason I've pointed at them separately is they actually are looking to share their knowledge with other European cities to try and help export some of these learnings and this investment that they've made in us and the tool to other European countries. So finally, how will it develop? Well, beyond maybe seeing a Scatter Romania or a Scatter Belgium in coming years with some of that EU dialogue, we've got it down to a few final key themes. So we really like the idea of letting users play around with it more and tailor it. And we've seen a fascinating sort of debate, really, of ambition versus feasibility, and obviously heavily subjective. No one fully knows what's feasible, but what we don't want as the modelers, we don't want to get in the way of constraining ambition. So we like the idea of letting the user play around and put in their own figures if they think actually the system can change. We're not going to be constrained by the politics or the system as it stands. So really opening it up to be able to be tailored is one thing. The second thing is to be able to weave in some of the science-based budgets stuff. So we work closely with the Tyndall Centre, who again have featured in many of these action plans that I've mentioned. And we're going to try and bake that into the tool more directly so that it's, again, makes life easier and, again, grounds some of the action plans in the science, which is obviously critical. This is why we're all here. We need to try and keep up with the science. So that's the second thing. And I think the final thing really comes back to some of that tech enablement that I mentioned. So really looking at other linkages that we can make. And I know, from some of the talks earlier, there's some fantastic things going on that I think could be brought together under that sort of digital banner so that people don't have to go looking at different corners of the internet to find the answers. And I think Scatter can really set up and create a bit of a hub to plug other things into. So whether that is action planning or whether it's more project or sectoral things that are going on, I think there's a ton of opportunity there to build things around this digitally and make life a lot easier for people. That's probably me about 10 minutes, but yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Matt. That was brilliant. I mean, I've been lucky enough to be along the journey on Scatter for most of what you've been doing, and to see it adopted so widely is just amazing. It really is. You also did very well under a giant disco ball, which, you know, is slightly disconcerting once you spot it. Anyway, so our next speaker, I'm really pleased about this next one because we've heard about HyNet. I know I've heard about HyNet for a couple of years, and I really want to know more. I really want to find out about its role in decarbonising industry. So Dr. Chris Manson-Whitten is going to be our next speaker, who's the director of HyNet. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Matt, as well, for referencing my hero, David Mackay. If you haven't read his book, read his book, Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air. It really puts things into context. Let me get myself to where we are. So, the title of my talk, why do we need to decarbonise our industry? I'm actually going to give you 3 titles. Why do we need to decarbonise our industry? Why does industry want to decarbonise, which is a separate but important question? And importantly, how can we do it? Because I'm about finding solutions. So, why do we need to decarbonise our industry? Here is a graph which came from the Committee on Climate Change in its net zero report. Apologies for those who can't quite see it at the back. It shows our UK territorial greenhouse gas emissions, and it starts back in 1990 at 800 million tonnes of CO2 per year. And when you look at the end of this graph, which is 2016, it's getting its way down to 400 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. What an amazing achievement. And genuinely, it really is. That's because we have taken our electricity down, we've removed coal from the bars largely and things like that. However, so good, so blah, 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 as Greta would say. Because what really matters is what our consumption emissions are. And this is that graph taken from the Committee on Climate Change report, the blue line that is there, and if you can't see it, it is still practically on that graph at around 800 million tonnes of CO2 per annum. That is why we need to decarbonise our industry. I've actually got some really up-to-date data, came out on the 4th of November this year. It's government's latest carbon footprinting exercise, and what it does is it takes 2017 and 2018. You will see that actually it's moved down to around 700 from 800. Good news, although actually 17 and 18 were about the same. But it tells us where those emissions come from. So yes, from our transport, our personal transport to get around, that's that bottom line, the red one. What comes out from our homes, and literally the emissions from heating our homes, so the stack emissions from the flues on our homes, and then the 2 big ones. The light blue one, which is practically 250 or so million tonnes of emissions, is UK production of things consumed in the UK. Now that does include our electricity, but mainly it's the products. It is the cement, the steel, and also all the consumer products we have. And even more scary, that 300 million tonne one is the embodied emissions in the services and goods that we receive here in the UK. So if you want to ask me the question, why does industry need to decarbonise, we have to give the ability for our industry to tackle the blue area here in the UK, and we have to make sure that that black area, those products are made low carbon. And if we lead the world in how we decarbonise, we should be making those products here in the UK and helping others to do it. So there we go. That is why we need to do it. Why does our industry want to decarbonise? Now that is a separate question. There are 3 key reasons. If you've been following the price of carbon dioxide, the carbon dioxide ETS trading scheme, it was bumbling along at £5–7 a tonne for most of the last decade. Recently, we are now at around £50 per tonne. If you are a reasonably large emitter, emitting 250,000 tonnes of CO2 every year, then you think of the implications of actually having a £50 per tonne on your bill that you are needing to deal with. So that is driving behaviour. One, the pound notes. Secondly, corporate and social responsibility, or ESG as well, which is that financiers want to back companies which have a sustainable plan, and that is driving the behaviour of companies. But the thing at the end which is absolutely so important, and I would say has changed over the last 6, 12, 18 months in the work that we've been doing here, is customers. Customers are demanding low carbon. So if I give you an example, take Diageo. They make drinks, well-known brands of drinks. They have been working on decarbonising the whiskey that they sell by working with distilleries to lower the carbon footprint. But now they're not just looking at the whiskey, they are looking at the bottle that that whiskey comes in, and they are making sure that bottle is low carbon. So here in the Northwest region, we have Encirc, which is one of the largest bottling manufacturers in this country. They are installing a new line that will be running on hydrogen and electricity in order to provide a low carbon bottle for Diageo to be able to sell a low carbon product. So we as consumers have the power to change what large companies are doing. So how do we do it? So if I'm dealing with large industry, I would say there are three main ways in which they can decarbonise. First and foremost, energy efficiency. They must use less energy. However, don't think that that is a silver bullet. Energy has cost money for decades. Industry has been motivated to decarbonise, to reduce the energy for decades. Therefore, whilst there is more to go at, and as the cost of carbon goes up, there is more of a driver, fundamentally, there is something to go, but we need more than that. We can capture carbon directly. If I take a cement works, 2/3 of those emissions are inherent in the product process that is there. So the only way of dealing with those emissions is to capture the CO2. I will talk about that later. Or finally, you can switch to a different fuel. Typically they're on natural gas. You can move to low carbon electricity. You can move to biomass. There are some cases where that will work. And you can move to low carbon hydrogen. If you are transmitting energy from one place to another, there are only two vectors you can do it without a carbon molecule. Either electrons, electricity, or hydrogen, which has no carbon. So those are two vectors which together must work together. And we heard earlier this morning, all these solutions must work together to deliver what we want. So how can we do it in practice? You've heard a little bit. Helen was talking this morning about HyNet Northwest. This is a little sketch of what it is. It comprises, one, CO2 transport and storage infrastructure. We will be safely and securely storing CO2 in gas fields in the Liverpool Bay, which have contained natural gas for decades, for millennia, and we will be using those to store CO2. At the centre, we have low carbon hydrogen production. That will be all forms of low carbon hydrogen. They all need to work together. But what we can achieve because of that CO2 infrastructure is high volumes of low carbon, low cost hydrogen built out at scale, which if industry is going to decarbonise, it needs. That plant will capture 97% of the CO2 coming out from the natural gas that is being used to convert. That is then connected to an 80-kilometre initially hydrogen distribution system that will rise to a 350-kilometre system. That will be provided by Cadent. Helen was talking about that earlier, which then gets the hydrogen from the producer to the user, but importantly also connects to storage, which allows us low-cost energy storage at 4 orders of magnitude than you could do with a battery to balance supply and demand. And together, that's the infrastructure that is HyNet, but importantly, it's about who is going to use it. You can see on this chart, we have over 30 users of that site, users who have signed up for that infrastructure. And you can see the logos. But let me tell you a story. I am looking forward to the time when someone here in the Northwest can sit in their house, looking out through a window made by Pilkingtons using low carbon hydrogen, in window frames made of aluminium coming from Novalis, who have recycled that aluminium and used hydrogen in order to do that. In a house using cement and concrete that's been made by Hanson, whose CO2 has been captured. And in the morning, I'll be eating breakfast made by Kellogg's, who will have used, here in Manchester, will have used low carbon hydrogen to make that cereal. And I'd hope in the evening I can sit there with a beer, also made in Manchester here, that's been bottled by NSERC using low carbon glass. That's the story. And if you think about that, every one of those actions is driven by our consumer behaviour, driving big industry to decarbonise in order to achieve the outcome we're looking for. So, yes, it is about emissions reduction. We will be able to save 10 million tonnes of CO2 emissions here in the region, which is around a quarter of our region, through that phase of HyNet alone that I've talked about. What does that do? There are 340,000 manufacturing jobs here that become safeguarded and secured because there is a low carbon solution, and it attracts inward investment from around the globe of people who want that CO2 and hydrogen infrastructure in order to provide low carbon goods and services. And then we take this blueprint that we deliver here and we roll it out across the country and we roll it out across the world. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Chris. That was brilliant. It's all so clear now. That's amazing. Thanks, Chris. That's excellent. Right, so our next speaker, really well placed, I think, Kate, given how many times we've heard about local energy production and local communities today. So our next speaker is Kate Gill-Martin from the Northwest Local Community Energy Hub. Over to you, Kate.
Very much. Hi, from the macro to the micro. I'm Kate Gill-Martin, and I worked as a renewable energy consultant until I took this job on at the Northwest Energy Hub, delivering the Rural Community Energy Fund across the Northwest. And that is to help communities access grant funding to look at scoping, seeding and delivering community-owned renewable energy projects. So the title of today is Power to the People, Enabling a Smart Energy Transition. And I thought that's really appropriate to what communities are trying to do in their locality through community energy. So we've not really heard much about community energy today. Patrick Alcorn did mention it once, so I was like, brilliant. So what is community energy? It's people joining together to find and enable solutions for carbon reduction through developing local projects. And this is really important because 40% of our emissions come from householders. And this kind of community level action is key if we're going to meet our net zero carbon targets. So how are communities delivering their low carbon projects? So it all goes back to the Rochdale Pioneers, who were the first ever cooperative society. And all community energy groups, well, I'd say nearly all community energy groups, use a cooperative society, a community benefit society, as the mainstay of their project, their entity that they develop. So it's all about equitable investment and ownership of that structure for this project delivery. And community, why they use the Community Benefit Society structure is it's regulated by their Financial Conduct Authority to raise investment through a community share issue. So communities will look at project delivery, they'll set up a community benefit society, they will get people to invest their money into that society to pay the capex for their project, which is usually going to be a renewable energy, heat or electricity generator. That will give them revenue. So a community benefit society is asset locked. It is very democratic because it's one member, one vote. So if you have £100,000 worth of shares, which is the maximum you're allowed, or £1 of shares, you have equal voting rights. And it is also it's not for profit, so any surplus goes into a community benefit fund. So we're talking about a net zero equitable transition, and this is a great model to deliver that. Oh, So the Rural Community Energy Fund is supporting these communities to deliver these types of projects based on the Community Benefit Society model. So I'm just going to run through some examples of projects that we're working with. One of them is in Chipping. So the village of Chipping is on oil. And we've given them some feasibility funding to look at how they can create a low-carbon solution to come off oil. So we're looking at an array of ground source boreholes, an energy centre and a heat network. And I think the key to thinking about this kind of project is that would it happen delivered by the market? And probably not. The market's probably not going to be particularly interested in chipping. The key with the heat network is you have to get people to sign up to actually want that heat. So you need at least 50% of that community to agree to have that heat coming into their home. So that's a key part of the financial viability of a project. So working with the parish council and the community land trust in Chipping, these people are trusted messengers within their community. If I went to the community and said, this is a good idea, they'd probably not answer the door. If I knocked on the door and said, do you want low carbon heat? They'd probably say, no, thanks very much, I'm okay. But because it's being delivered and spearheaded through the parish council, that these people are well respected within their communities and they are listened to. And if they're vouching for this project, then they're much more likely to get people uptaking this idea. So the key here is communities are trusted messengers. Another project we're looking at in Cumbria is 22 affordable new homes. And the community wanted to find a solution for heating rather than just extend the gas network, which they are on in Kirkby Stephen. So again, we've funded feasibility work to look at a low carbon solution. And here again, we're looking at ground source boreholes, an energy centre and a heat main for these 22 houses. But we're also layering on top of that a microgrid. So it means that solar panels on those roofs of those houses will go, any generation will go to the microgrid as opposed to each individual house. We're also looking at battery storage. So rather than each individual house having a battery, those batteries will go in the energy centre. So it's all about localised solutions and balancing. But one of the other innovations on this project is rather than exporting any surplus PV generation in the summer months, we're actually going to use that energy and put it back in the ground. So we're charging those boreholes to heat the ground. So it means that in the winter, when we need that heat out, we're starting at a higher heat temperature and the heat pumps will work at a better coefficient of performance. So it's really thinking about the long term, not just affordable heat and the low carbon heat, but also grid balancing, because we're going to have a really big issue with the grid and actually how we manage to decarbonise without reinforcing everywhere, which is going to be incredibly expensive. So this kind of solution is community-led, but it's pushing boundaries. And whereas developers usually just want to get a development done, this community is really thinking about the long-term solutions and how this can be grid compatible. And would this happen in the marketplace? I doubt it. So this is why communities are really well placed to deliver. Another project, again in Cumbria, it's a small hydro scheme, so 45 kilowatt hydro scheme, and the community wanted to deliver this project. And I said, well, you need to have a private wire to sell the electricity because hydro on its own isn't very financially viable. And this has evolved as a project from looking at one particular installation to actually, can we do a private wire to the hotel? Can we get the hotel to consume more of this hydro generation? If so, can we get them off oil onto a heat pump? Can they put EV chargers in? And then we hit the problem that actually the grid hasn't got capacity to allow the heat pump or the EV, but it will do if we put the hydro generator in. So again, we're looking at very localised solutions. We're looking at active network management. We're looking at smart EV chargers. So it's really getting the community to think holistically about the long-term low-carbon solutions within their community. Another project is a 2 megawatt solar farm in Accrington, and this is on a kind of 3.5 hectare brownfield site. And we basically did some modelling and we said, well, if you're just going to sell this electricity to the grid at an export tariff, then it's not going to be financially viable. So we said, okay, well, again, we need to look at an off-taker. We need a private wire to a high energy consumer. So because it's the community, they went out and they said, right, who in our community is going to be that high energy consumer? And they decided to talk to the factory down the road, a chemical factory that's been there for 175 years. So they've worked with this factory and they're looking at doing a solution with a private wire, a long-term power purchase agreement for that chemical factory. The chemical factory is going to have low carbon electricity, stability from price fluctuations, and security of supply. And it's a real testament to the community trying to collaborate within the community to find these partnerships. And now, unfortunately, this isn't in the Northwest, but it's a great story. It's a community group down in Bristol called Ambition Community Interest Company, and they've just delivered 2 4-megawatt wind turbines that are wholly community owned. So any revenue from these wind turbines will go to the local community and help them with fuel poverty alleviation. Community planning, wind energy, wind turbines need to get through planning, and that won't happen without community consensus. We've got fantastic wind resource in the Northwest. We need to look at community ownership models for wind turbines, but also wind farms. We need onshore wind. Speak to ENW, they'll say the same thing. We've got to be able to balance the grid. We need winter generation. Wind has to have its place. But if it's community owned or for community benefit, that's a great place to start. Okay, I'm very quickly wrapping up. Innovation, another 2 projects here that have really showcased communities' innovation, because communities, they're not like a developer where they have an option of 5 different projects. They will look at the project that is in their locality and they will circumvent any barrier possible to make that project happen. So here we've got the Riding Sunbeams project. 4-megawatt solar farm. They couldn't connect to the grid without it being really expensive. So they said, well, why can't we put this electricity into the third rail traction system that runs alongside our site? And so the Riding Sunbeams project was born. They've now been on the front of the New Scientist magazine, and they're also doing projects in India. And I can't not mention Carbon Co-op doing their people-powered retrofit program. Fantastic innovation around retrofit. So in summary, community energy, equitable net zero transition. There are absolutely loads of co-benefits. Collective action is going to be cheaper, faster, more effective. Community energy empowers. We've got to think about decentralised renewable energy and localised balancing. How do we get communities on board? We're all members of a community, and you think about how you're going to transition to net zero in your community and those barriers. And last but not least, community energy is 10% strategy, but 90% delivery mechanism. We've got a delivery mechanism, we've got an investment strategy, and we've got grassroots activity. All 3 things are going to be key to get us to net zero. We would like a local electricity bill. We'd love to be able to sell the electricity we generate to our communities. So if you're a politician, then shout out for that. And boots on the ground. We need more boots on the ground. We need more resources to help communities deliver this kind of action. And last but not least, we need to have green legacy bonds and tax relief on those. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. That was brilliant. And for those of you who couldn't see the bottom of the screen, on every slide it said, would this happen if left to the market? No. So I think that was an important point that you're making there, Kate. Brilliant. We're going to return now to hydrogen for a moment and hear from Emma Gaffer, who's the director of the Manchester Fuel Cell Innovation Centre at Manchester Met. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks, Steve. All this talk about hydrogen and skills. Fantastic. I'm still in that same world where Chris was talking about, I'm looking out through the window, I'm seeing hydrogen windows, I'm seeing things, I'm going on holiday there. The presentation you're about to see is not actually mine. It's a collaboration between work from Marketing Manchester and Midas that we've put together because we've heard a lot about the supply side of hydrogen. Now this is really down to the demand side, and to really showcase that opportunity for Greater Manchester and the wider Northwest. I've got the same suit on. But within that opportunity, I think it's good for us. So let me tell you a little bit about the Fuel Cell Centre. The Fuel Cell Centre is a £4.1 million research and innovation centre based at Manchester Metropolitan University. We support businesses to innovate in electrolyzers and fuel cell technology. We work on the materials challenges associated with those, And we've supported over 100 businesses that have come from Greater Manchester, the wider Northwest, and more international. I think what we're finding more and more is as the supply side of projects like HyNet are being announced with multiple strategies across multiple governments, all that demand side is trickling down for us. So we want to be a world leader in this area, and there's already some fantastic work going on. There's multiple announcements that have come out of the UK hydrogen strategy. Is it ambitious enough? You know, it's debatable. I was at COP last week where there was an announcement made for 45 gigawatts of green hydrogen. You know, I was jumping up and down. I thought it was fantastic. I think, but what does that opportunity mean for us here in Greater Manchester? Well, it's recognising, first of all, 96% of the world's hydrogen comes from non-fossil fuels. We're not interested in grey hydrogen. We're interested in blue or green. Ultimately, you know, whichever way you look at it, green is where everyone wants to get to with every single piece of technology. Is the electricity system completely decarbonised? You know, I think Johnny mentioned it earlier, how much percent of the electricity that we use comes from renewable sources. It's not 100%. So I think that in mind, it's recognising that projects like HyNet will influence what we do here in JN, because we work on developing that supply chain. The businesses that we support are interested in projects like HyNet because they're thinking, where's the opportunity for me as an SME? Projects like HyNet bring focus to that. There's a huge skills aspect to today. So in terms of, you know, Greater Manchester, this is not even me to sort of tell you, but what we recognise for a fantastic science asset base. And I think that's what we find with some of the companies we support. They utilise ourselves, University of Manchester, the materials challenges associated with what we're trying to do, and really develop out what we see. So those words, discover, develop, deploy, well, we're there for the discovery part. The develop, we do that as a collaboration. Then deploy, we've got the Greater Manchester footprint, which is actively looking for hydrogen projects now, and we're involved with some. So why Manchester Hydrogen? That's one of our researchers, he's fantastic. What do we specifically do within the Fuel Cell Centre? I'm going to build that into my next presentation, that's a fantastic thing. Probably the only electrolyser today in the centre of Manchester is within our lab. It's on the 5th floor of a tower block. And I always use this line because it took forever and a day to try and get that electrolyser approved. We got stopped by HSE, we got stopped by Desir. You know, I took a small generator into Manchester Central. I was surrounded by 6 HNSC people because I had a tiny little bottle of hydrogen and a 230 watt fuel cell generator. And it took a week's worth of risks, and everything's taken too long, and I think that's what we need to fast track. That's something that we can support within the Fuel Cell Centre. So we work on those new materials challenges, and specifically, we test new concepts. So companies send us their materials, get them, and we try and ruin them effectively. We say, you know, how much will they withstand a chemical attack? How much will they withstand trying to develop new materials? The existing technology is full of materials challenges. So if I look at the green hydrogen opportunity at the moment, the green hydrogen companies that exist, they've got huge problems with iridium. It's more expensive than platinum. Fuel cells have a problem in the fact that the stacks within platinum, and it's not cheap. I remember when I bought my wedding ring. We work with partners internationally because every single global economy is now finally trying. So this is nothing that I'm saying here is new technology. Hydrogen's not new technology. You know, projects like HyNet, yes, hydrogen's been around for a long, long time. Fuel cells were invented by someone in Wales a long, long time ago. We're talking about it now because of that net zero ambition. In terms of a type of company that we support, so this is a great example of a company who have come as an inward investment opportunity to Greater Manchester. They've gone to the Graphene Institute, they've done some fantastic work with them. We've looked at that opportunity for them to introduce graphene into, it was time, there was a time where we were going to start talking about graphene in fuel cells. We're in Manchester, we talk about graphene all the time. We have to. So this is a project that is actually looking at introducing graphene within to the fuel cell membrane, because that's what we're trying to eradicate. We're trying to eradicate or reduce that platinum content, and that is a materials challenge. Why Manchester? And I think this is to recognise that we don't, you know, I'd love to stand here and say hydrogen's going to solve all our problems. It's not. All of these technologies are going to solve all our problems. All of that investment in our people and the skills is going to solve all our problems. This is something that Manchester has recognised, and we're going through this energy transition region. And we funded ourselves, University of Manchester, Bruntwood, Hitachi, SSE. We funded an energy innovation agency. And that's to create those ideas and opportunities across those different aspects of that energy transition. I'd like to say that when someone comes to Manchester and say, I'm interested in hydrogen, they'll call me as opposed to someone else, because we're recognised for being that hydrogen university. But this is about creating that sandbox and that innovation test bed that companies can come and think that I want to achieve net zero with these range of technologies, and Greater Manchester will help me. Trafford Low Carbon Energy Park is our solution to producing hydrogen at scale, and that will be green hydrogen. And the same organisations are involved in HyNet that are involved in the Trafford project. Cadent are involved. I work very closely with Helen on this. And you look at the partners that are on there. We started this as an ambition back in March. That's led to an MOU. That's led to this project going into formal planning with an initial phase of 10 megawatts. The ultimate ambition for this project is to be a 200 megawatt green electrolyser, which would make it UK's largest electrolyser. For us, it's interesting because the businesses that we work with are massively interested in this opportunity. We supported those businesses over probably since 2018, since we opened, and it's only now, as a result of the hydrogen strategy and all these multiple strategies being released, that they're starting to recognise what that opportunity means. It means that they can fast-track their innovation within this space. So it's about, what are we interested in? Well, I'm interested in, as a director of this fuel cell centre, in targeting those companies that are researching hydrogen with those materials challenges. We focus on a aspect of that hydrogen value chain, and it's fuel cells, electrolysers. Greater Manchester is an ideal place for collaboration. It always has been, and I think that's what the Energy Innovation Agency is showing, is that it's ourselves, it's University of Manchester, it's GMCA, it's a number of different organisations that are coming together to solve that problem. I would love to see hydrogen buses. The first time I see a hydrogen bus, I will probably chase after it in the centre of Manchester. I did it in London. My family thought I was just crazy, but I've done it, and I will do it again. Because what do we bring? We are going to support businesses, whether you're interested in deployment scenarios, whether you're interested in that opportunity that Greater Manchester can bring, because finally we have a answer to that chicken and egg problem. We're able to refuel hydrogen buses, hydrogen trucks, passenger vehicles. To go off tangent here, Steve, I did put a fuel cell car into my original plans for the fuel cell centre, but it would have been sat there for 3 years, and I probably would have got shouted at quite a lot. The fact that I bought this car and it's not being used. But if you look at the deployment scenarios we're trying to create, it's a ring with our 2038 ambition. 2038 is going to be hard to achieve. It's not impossible, but it's going to be hard to achieve, and it will involve all of these range of technologies and identifying those innovation gaps and those commercial opportunities that prove that Manchester is an attractive place for companies to invest in this area. So what are we trying to do in terms of that, where our ambition is to grow out into a much larger facility. At the moment, we support businesses in TRL level 1 to around 4. We're now going to be supporting businesses with that later stage TRL ambition because we want to build a much larger facility. But I think to underpin everything that we do, the skills aspect, which has been mentioned a number of times, is critical. So I'm very pleased I can stand here and say we produced probably the world's first hydrogen education program for schools. It's been used by thousands of teachers and thousands of students on a weekly basis. And that makes me proud. What we also work with is the Net Zero Northwest Cluster, because we're working to identify what that skills opportunity looks like across the Northwest, and it's not all to do with technology. This will require multiple disciplines. We'll need economists, we'll need artists, we'll need psychologists. We want to start looking at level 1 to level 8 skills. So it's not all about university graduates. It's about reskilling those people in current employment. It's about working with those organisations that are going to see themselves obsolete as a result of 2038 and those ambitions that we have across the Northwest. And in terms of what we're here to do, if you're interested in innovation, please speak to us or my colleagues at the Energy Innovation Agency. For hydrogen deployment, work with our innovation agency again, but I'm interested in learning from those companies that are looking at scale, so that market opportunity, because that's what our ambition is to do. And finally, that hydrogen task group has really been set up to get involved in shaping Greater Manchester's view and strategy on hydrogen. So that's something I'm working with Helen from Cadent on quite a lot, and that's why in my tweet I called her a hydrogen hero, because I think there's a number of them in the room. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emma, that was great. And having known you for 10 years working on this, I know you would chase after that hydrogen bus. And I love the idea of you just getting a big bottle of hydrogen into the lift at MMU and thinking, oh, no, I'll get away with this. Our final speaker for this afternoon is Gareth Hughes, who's the chairman and co-founder, I think I've got that right, Gareth, of Advanced Bacterial Sciences. Over to you, Gareth.
Thank you. And to all of you who came to see Derek Allen, hopefully you won't be too disappointed. 20 years ago, I co-founded a company called Climate Change Capital. Let me just flick that on. We were one of the very early sort of environmentally focused asset management advisory businesses. And about 2 weeks ago, I'm moving house, and I went into my stable and I opened up the trunk that had all of my old pitch book for Climate Change Capital, the predecessor to that. And you could take nearly all of the narrative and policy stuff from then and put it into Glasgow last week and this week. And it is a tragedy, actually, how much time we've lost and how little time we have to solve the problems. And I'm covered with the scars of helping companies fund businesses, and we had a $1 billion carbon fund at Climate Change Capital. I remain optimistic that we have the technologies that can solve the problems, and we've seen many of these being presented today, and it is actually quite exciting, but the big challenge is the time that things are going to take to get stuff done, and whether there is the political will to solve these problems. 2.5 years ago, I co-founded what was called Active Bacterial Solutions. We've rebranded recently to call it Advanced Bacterial Sciences. And I think this is the most exciting business I've ever been involved with, because we are doing what nature does with bacteria, just turbocharging the bacteria to solve many of the waste problems. And this is a genuine where there is muck, there's brass, because this is a $2 trillion problem globally in how we treat waste of all descriptions. Anybody who's got problems with blocked urinals, with blocked sinks, with blocked sewage outlets, with grease traps and problems with runoff from fields of nitrates and phosphates creating algal blooms in rivers, riverside with the sewage and stuff, we have solutions for all of those things. We have lots of solutions looking for problems. And this is genuinely a no regrets opportunity for all companies who today are using toxic chemicals. Our products are non-toxic, non-pathogenic, they're clean, they're cheap, they're good for the environment. Why would you not want to use them? So today we have first generation products that break down the buildup of uric acid in urinals, that break down hydrocarbons in OWIs, that break down grease and grease traps. And rather than pushing the problem downstream so it becomes somebody else's problem, our bacteria are really smart, and they actually digest the waste and they turn it into water and a little bit of CO2. And as I said, it's just what nature does naturally. And there are many, many opportunities for us to do that. We've established a centre of excellence in Lancaster at the university. We have 10 scientists today. We're going to have 50 hopefully within 3 years. In our innovation centre, we are going to bring in other innovative companies to be part of that community. And this generally is $1 billion business opportunity in the next few years. The challenge is often legacy issues. It's facts that actually people get paid not to do things very well. Not solving problems is a very lucrative opportunity for many companies. But what we're trying to do is to look at how do we rebalance the environment? How do we do things better? From an energy perspective, everything that we do requires less energy, less emissions. So by not having to treat waste with expensive membranes or expensive energy sources, water companies, we're saving emissions, we're saving energy. So think of us as a negawatt business as opposed to megawatt. We can also treat natural products like slurry, animal waste, food waste, and we can increase the methane fraction of that waste to create more energy. And we can capture the good stuff at the back end of those AD processes to create nitrates and phosphates that can then get recycled back into the farming community, so we grow less reliant on the inorganic, high energy, high carbon fertilizers that we're using today. So there's a huge area around regeneration. And the other benefit of what we do is in the farming community. We're looking to work with plants and the agronomists to find ways of helping plants take up more of the good stuff and manage that better, manage the spreading of slurry, etc., better than is done at the moment. So many opportunities. We are very fortunate to be up here in the Northwest. Miranda Barker, some of you will know, has been a fantastic champion. Ian Troe, AMRC, just in the last 6 months, we've had such amazing support. And we hope that will continue because we see so many opportunities up here of working with companies. And we look forward to doing that going forward. So I just wanted to bring up one slide which you can't really see, but for those of you who are familiar with the 9 boundaries, this is work that's been done by the Stockholm Institute, and basically it breaks down where we are today globally in terms of the sort of the problems that we have and where we are reaching tipping points or have gone beyond tipping points. And many of those are, you know, climate is the big one people talk about. Biodiversity is a massive issue. And part of what we're trying to do is to rebalance that and bring the sort of the dark orange back into the light orange, back into the green. But there is a real risk that if we go too far into the dark orange, it will become irreversible. We're already seeing in places like Turkey, Marmaris, this issue with what they call sea snot, basically algal blooms devastating the local beaches and local waters, damaging fishing. And it's basically stuff coming out of the factories that is not being treated properly. And it's meeting waters that are warming up. So the algae just love that. It needs to be treated. It needs to be treated at the industry level. It needs to be treated in the rivers. It needs to be treated around the shorelines. Massive opportunity. And this is the same everywhere. If you're planning to build property in many parts of the UK today, you will not get planning consent unless you're buying nitrate offsets. Okay? We have an investor who's a developer in Southampton, 100 apartment building. It's going to cost him between £2,000 and £7,000 per unit to purchase nitrate offsets. We can deliver an engineered solution using our bacteria at half that cost. So lots and lots of very exciting opportunities using these natural products, nature's way, just doing it better and quicker, more cost effectively. And anybody who is running a building, who has issues with their pipes, drains, sewage, whatever, I urge you, check out Advanced Bacterial Sciences, ABS, and please buy our products or encourage the facility managers or anybody else who's responsible for dealing with waste to do that. Water companies, massive issue at the moment with all of these sewage issues. I'm not entirely sure what the outcome was of the Environment Bill yesterday. I understand it's a little bit tighter in terms of ambition, but still not enough. So, where there's muck, there's brass. We're very excited to be here. We're very excited to be up in the Northwest. We have some brilliant people, brilliant scientists. We're very excited to be part of this journey. It is about low emissions. It is about low energy. And it's about cleaning up the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gareth. That was brilliant. And I think probably one of only 3 or 4 times today that we've actually heard people talking about negawatts and reducing energy, actually. We haven't talked enough about that today, and you did. And I love the idea of your smart bacteria being unleashed on all sorts of thorny problems. Yeah. I am also a big fan of the Stockholm Institute and their boundaries work, so I'm really glad you brought that up. However, because I've been so busy today, I've been desperate to go to the loo. And so there are some aspects of your talk that were slightly painful. But anyway, thank you so much, Gareth. That is the end of our event today. That was our last speaker for a day. We've had a huge number of speakers, actually. One reason why it's been so fast-paced, I hope you're okay with that, was we just had so much we wanted to get in. It was really important that we covered everything today, so we tried to. I hope we've pulled it off. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you again to everyone here at Escape to Freight Island for being brilliant hosts today. I say it again, I think this is the coolest COP venue in the UK. And so thanks to all of you for coming. Our hashtag COP26 Northwest is there to be used. Please keep this conversation going and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.